After a 7-year brutal war, Houthi rebels refuse to give up arms and seize peace opportunity. In a flagrant act of the international law, Houthi militia recruit African migrants and use them as battle fuel. The displaced people's suffering continues as the conflict extends throughout the country. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. It has been now 7 months since the Saudi government proposed a ceasefire that Houthi rebels turned down. Houthis think they are in a strong position to reject the Saudi proposals. The following report attempts to dig deeply into the Houthi refusal to the Saudi initiative.
After 7 years of brutal civil war in Yemen, the Iran-backed Houthi militia refuses to give up arms and negotiate, despite the Saudi ceasefire offer proposed last March and the US withdrawing its support for Riyadh's role in the conflict last month. So far, Houthi rebels have refused to put down their weapons and enter into talks. Experts say the Saudi olive branch comes from a potential roadmap to peace first discussed over a year ago. It was set up under the UN's auspices, but now envisages a more prominent role for the US since Joe Biden replaced Donald Trump as president. This plan includes a UN-supervised ceasefire, measures to reopen Sana'a airport in the Yemeni capital, and lifting of trade restrictions on the government-controlled Hodeidah port, followed by talks between the Houthis and the Yemen's government. For the Houthis, the devil is in the details, Beta Salisbury, a Yemen specialist at the Brussels-based International Crisis Group, wrote on Twitter. The Saudis, the government and the Houthis say they support the initiative in concept terms but have quibbled incessantly over timing, sequencing and the details of each aspect. But whereas the Houthis want Hodeidah port and Sana'a airport to be completely open to all international traffic, the Saudi proposal envisages a role for the Yemeni government in regulating both and for a ceasefire to come before any economic or humanitarian assistance. The proposal also suggests the sharing of revenues on the trade in oil through Hodeidah. The Saudis appears to double down on the idea that it is the Houthis who have to make concessions here, Salisbury wrote. And indeed the Houthi response has been clear. They say this is an old offer and that they have been clear in their position. Completely lift barriers to movement on Hodeidah and Sana'a airport, they accuse the Saudis of using humanitarian crises as leverage. Seeing revenue sharing at Hodeidah and the reopening of Sana'a airport are long-standing Houthi demands, it's clear that Riyadh believes it's calling the bluff in front of the US and the UN to show they don't want peace in Yemen. Cisenia Bianco, a research fellow on the Gulf at the European Council on Foreign Relations, wrote on Twitter. The Houthis appear to think they are in a strong enough position to turn down the Saudis' proposals. Riyadh follows an increase in attacks by the Houthi rebels against oil installations in the kingdom, with the Houthis launching another drone attack on airport in southern Saudi Arabia. This follows the Houthis' intensification in recent weeks of their attacks on Ma'rib, an oil-rich town and the UN-recognized government's last remaining stronghold in northern Yemen. Ma'rib is essential for us because of the blockade which stops the impoverished Yemeni population from buying petrol and gas at market prices. Abdul Majid al-Hanash, a Sana'a-based Houthi negotiator, told us last week, as long as this blockade is imposed on northern Yemen, preventing access to these much needed goals, we will have to try and lift it by force. Ultimately, the concessions offered by Riyadh through their ceasefire initiative plus the unusual Saudi flexibility should have been embraced by Houthi rebels if they consider ending the suffering of millions of Yemenis. Yet, rejecting it or even any similar peace proposal is no surprise, as the very genetic structure of Houthis seems to base in violence, and nothing but violence.
In Ma'rib, a number of families faced displacement in Rahaba district due to random Houthi shelling in the city. Sources said that dozens of families were displaced during the past 2 days as a result of the Houthi militia's escalation in Rahaba. Civilians were targeted with all kinds of weapons, including ballistic missiles and drones, forcing the residents to leave their homes and areas in search of safety. The number of displaced families in the past 2 days has reached 150 families, which is more than 1,000 individuals. Meanwhile, the executive unit for the managing IDPs camps said that the militia targeted residential areas in Rahaba with artillery and booby-trapped aircraft, which led to the killing of 2 civilians and wounding of about 20 others. Also, displaced families were distributed among the districts of El Juba, Harib, Jabal Murad, and El Medina. Because of Houthi attacks on displaced camps in Ma'rib, those camps face closure, and thousands of internally displaced families can find themselves without shelter. This report has more details on the suffering of displaced people in Ma'rib. Thousands of displaced Yemeni families in Ma'rib face the threat of expulsion from the random camps in which they live, as these camps are built on private lands. Also, more than 6,000 other families face the risk of eviction from their homes due to their inability to pay the monthly rent. In an update on the humanitarian situation in Yemen, the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs stated that the shelter needs of newly displaced Yemenis through Ma'rib have been increasing since the beginning of the year, as nearly 24,000 people are displaced from their homes by armed clashes, shelling, and airstrikes in a city that already hosts a quarter of Yemen's 4 million internally displaced people. According to the UN report, most of the newly displaced went to seek safety in urban centers and about 150 in informal areas. Living conditions in settlements remain miserable, with a lack of supplies of shelter, clean water, electricity, and health facilities, according to UNHCR report. With women and children making up to 80% of the displaced, they are the ones who suffer the most from the resulting overcrowding, lack of privacy, and limited access to basic services. UNHCR provides basic household items, legal aid, and psychological support across 7 settlements in Sirwah, which hosts about 20,000 individuals. In addition, UNHCR is distributing cash for rent to more than 2,800 families as part of their cash-based interventions to assist 6,000 families at risk of eviction. The United Nations indicated that thousands of displaced Yemeni families are currently facing the threat of eviction, and that during the past week, the authorities in Ma'rib shared a list of 2,800 families at risk of eviction from 13 sites, hosting internally displaced people on privately owned lands, which need a solution for resettlement urgently. Furthermore, at least 5 families were evicted from a site that was hosting IDPs from Amran Governorate by the owner and moved to another area within the same site. Another 28 families have also been ordered to move to other locations in the next week. The suffering of the displaced in Ma'rib continues, either by conflicts and wars, ignored by the militia, or to the inability to afford basic life needs. Houthi militia continues to recruit African migrants and send them to field battles. Sources revealed that there are more than 300 recruits of Ethiopian and Somali nationalities fighting in frontiers. The sources reported that the militia members arrested Africans coming from the government-controlled areas in El Baida, Damar, Taiz, and moved them to a training camp in Damar. Sources confirmed that some of these Africans committed suicide inside of the Houthi camps only to escape going to France. In the same time, Houthi al-Masira TV showed a number of Africans chanting the militia's mottos and declaring allegiances to the militia's leader. In Taiz, a girl was wounded by a Houthi gunshot west of the city. Local sources said that the Houthi militia targeted with live bullets the populated areas in the line linking Taiz and Hodeidah. This resulted in the injury of the little girl Aisha Ali Thabit with a bullet in the abdomen while she was playing in front of her house. It was reported that the girl was transferred to El Makha for treatment. 7 years of brutal wars in Yemen now, while Houthi rebels refuse to give up arms and negotiate a peace deal. This has made some active members in the international community feel disappointed, and they started blaming Houthis firmly for blocking all peace efforts. The following report tracks Houthi constant obstruction of all United Nations-led peace proposals.
With the start of the new UN Special Envoy's walk in Yemen, the tone of international resentment against the Houthis' violations in Yemen rose amid warnings of prolonged crisis due to the militia's continuous rejection of political solutions. Despite the constant visits to the region by the US envoy, Tim King, he did not achieve any significant breakthrough. He called for a ceasefire and a return to the negotiating table, which has not been achieved so far. This comes amid concerns by officials that the crisis in Afghanistan can overshadow the war in Yemen, which claimed the lives of about 130,000 people. Meanwhile, the leader of the Houthi militia renewed his rejection of any peace proposals and said he had decided to continue the war. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who reiterated the United States' strong condemnation of the recent Houthi attack on Saudi Arabia, he said that since the beginning of this year, Saudi Arabia has been subjected to more than 240 attacks by the Houthis, who have endangered the Saudi people, along with more than 70,000 American citizens residing in Saudi Arabia. He added, the Houthis have intensified their attacks inside Yemen in recent weeks, especially their attack on Marib. This costly and faltering attack will complicate the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. The Houthi attacks perpetuate the conflict, prolong the suffering of the Yemeni people, and threaten peace efforts at a critical moment, according to the US Secretary. Blinken called on the Houthi militia once again to abide by the ceasefire and to indulge into negotiations under the auspices of the United Nations. In the same context, the charge d'affaires of the US ambassador met with the Yemeni Minister of Defense and said that it is time to end the war to stop the suffering of Yemenis, and stressed that Houthis must stop the escalation and seize the available peace opportunities. Also, the Swedish foreign minister met with the US envoy to Yemen to discuss peace efforts, where she stressed the need for coordinated international support to help end the fighting and re-energize the political process. Despite international efforts to end the Yemeni crisis, the United Nations acknowledged that there are no signs looming on the horizon to end the Yemeni crisis. This came in a statement of a senior UN official for the Middle East at a Security Council session last week, saying, "The parties in Yemen have not made any progress in reaching a political agreement to settle the civil war that has entered its 7th year. On one hand, international community stressed that war must end. Houthis continue to refuse all peace efforts, but also escalate military operations on the other hand. It is inevitable that the basic Yemeni citizen hardship will continue."
A massive fire devastated homes of displaced people in the Durayhimi area south of Hodeidah. Local residents said that the fire broke out in the straw houses inhabited by the displaced people in the Nakhila area, which led to the destruction of entire 5 houses. Coming next. Houthi rebels continue to crack down Yemeni women.
ثالثتي على منطقة الروضة، استهدف الأطفال الأبرياء اللي يلعبوا في الشارع. بيدعي للسلام، يقولوا السلام يقتل أطفالنا، يقاتل أطفالنا الأبرياء.
أنا قلت افتجعت ولا أقول معي واحد صاروخ ثاني، طلعت البيت حقنا. أنا ألعب أنا وأصحابي والصاروخ الطرح.
Welcome back. Over the past 2 days, Houthi militia was reported to have troops reinforcements from 4 governorates under its control to different frontiers in Ma'rib. Sources confirmed that this militia reinforcements are from Hajja, Amran, Damar, and Ib. This development reinforcements comes after the militia witnessed heavy losses during the past 2 days across the city. According to sources, reinforcements are estimated to be at more than 300 militants, including children. Since Houthi rebels seized the capital Sana'a in 2015, human rights violation acts have been committed on a daily basis. Such a thing received local, regional, and international condemnation. These violations have reached climax with the targeting of women, neglecting all social and traditional norms that the Yemeni society prides on. This report has more on some of the recent Houthi militia violations that targeted women in the capital Sana'a.
I don't feel like a human being. I can't breathe properly like other human beings. This is what a Yemeni woman said when asked to express her situation in Yemen, as her shaky voice reflected the sadness, hurt, and fear which women in Yemen have come to experience on a daily basis. Women in Yemen from Ma'rib, Taiz, and Sana'a experience violence almost all the time. In Yemen, women are solely responsible for securing food, water, and medicine for their children, in the light of the Houthi militia's theft of humanitarian aid and to use women to serve the war. Women in Houthi-controlled areas face various types of violations, including the confiscation of their right to express opinion and demonstrate, as the Houthis have imprisoned hundreds of women in their own prisons and practice various types of torture and violations against them. Although the gender roles shift can provide an opportunity to elevate women's status when she is equipped with adequate abilities, women as a result of this transition have been further subjected to violence. The conflict in Yemen has had a horrific impact on all civilians, generally women, and girls have been disproportionately affected. The fighting has left the country's people struggling with a dire economic crisis, damaged infrastructure, and collapsed services. But in addition, women have had to contend with limited mobility due to cultural gender norms. Also, since they are responsible for providing food and care in their homes, they have had to struggle with the challenges of limited access to food, water, sanitation, and healthcare services, which has seen a steady deterioration as the conflict continues. The Yemeni women should be heard, and international organizations should look forward on this issue.
The General Electricity Corporation in Aden warned of a complete power outage in the coming hours due to high temperatures. According to the corporation, the power station in Aden has already gone out of service. The corporation appealed to concerned authorities to hasten supplying the power stations before the rest goes out of service due to the fuel shortage. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced the registration of 67 new cases of the epidemic in 5 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 31 cases were recorded in Hadramaut, 31 in Aden, 3 in Taiz, 1 in Ma'rib, and 1 in Shabwa. Also, 27 deaths were documented, 22 in Aden, 4 in Hadramaut, and 1 in Taiz, plus 29 recovered cases, 18 in Aden and 11 in Hadramaut. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 1,018, including 1,513 deaths and 4,937 cases of recovery. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. After a 7-year brutal war, Houthi rebels refuse to give up arms and seize peace opportunity. In a flagrant act of the international law, Houthi militia recruit African migrants and use them as battle's fuel. The displaced people's suffering continues as the conflict extends throughout the country. This is the end of the news. It was Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.